Okay. So for both Caroline and Corey, what is your best first date? What was your best first date?
What was the best first date? There was a lot of good first dates.
Okay.
The best dates, the best first dates are always dates with girls you really like, ones that light you up on the inside,
Mm-hmm.
where typically you're eye fucking each other from the beginning. Those are the most intense ones I've found.
Yeah.
Because I've had the experience where I meet a girl and I really like her. I'm super attracted to her, but she's just kind of like, eh,
Right.
go out. Just kind of
Mm-hmm.
like that. And over time,
Mm-hmm.
I was able to get her to fall for me and fall in love and have a relationship. But comparing that, because that takes skill, obviously, and acting like a man. But the bottom line is she was interested enough to go out on a date,
Yeah.
but not as into me as I was into her.
Mm-hmm.
And so as a man, if especially if women feel that, that's typically enough for her to reject you.
Right.
But I acted masculine enough to attract her to me, get her to fall in love, have a relationship with her, and it was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But what was so much more satisfying and more fulfilling, and the relationship and the feelings are 1,000 times more intense,
Yeah.
was when we met, and it was just like an instant connection. Eye fucking from and smiling at each other the moment we laid eyes on one another.
Yeah.
To me, those are like spiritually arranged. Those are people that you are destined to meet, and you know it from the moment you look in each other's eyes,
Mm-hmm.
and then you start talking, and things just the feelings that you feel inside, the energy really that you feel inside is so much different, so much more intense,
Right.
and the connection's better because you're more into her. And what I loved about that compared to where I was super into her and she wasn't that into me
Mm-hmm.
was that when somebody's super into you from the beginning, you're going to like them more because they already really like you. It's
Yeah.
nice. You want to be with somebody that really wants you and really wants to be with you. And so when it's kind of mutual, a mutual intensity like that,
Mm-hmm.
those are soul changing type of events. You're never the same after that. And once you've had that kind of a connection and then you get to have a relationship with somebody like that, it's
Mm-hmm.
those kind of connections, they always stay in touch. Even if you guys never date or get together, they always will stay in touch with you. Even if it might be once or twice a year, they still reach out because
Mm-hmm.
they think fondly and highly of you. And you're always grateful to hear from them. It's like same thing with my closest friends. There was just something different. We clicked from the time we started hanging out.
Mm-hmm.
It was like Chunky's dad and I were. I don't even remember when we met. I know we met sophomore year. I
Mm-hmm.
just remember he was always around. He was always smiling at me, always glad to see me, always made me feel like he wanted me there, and was glad that he had the opportunity to hang out and talk or whatever. And it's always
Mm-hmm.
been that way. My closest friends were always like that. It
Yeah.
just like even my German friend Andy. It's like I remember we met. I was hanging out with another friend of mine who was also in real estate, and we met at Hooters in like downtown Orlando. He's like, "Oh, you gotta meet my buddy Andy.
Mm-hmm.
He's hilarious." And so we meet at Hooters and start having a few beers, and we start talking politics and start talking about history and stuff. And he was
Mm-hmm.
telling me, some of his family members and stuff. They then obviously were talking about the war and stuff like that, because his grandparents were like teenagers or young.
Yeah.
I think they were actually in their early 20s during the beginning of World War II. And so I was fascinated by world history because both my grandfathers were in it
Right.
in World War II. My mom's father he was a captain in the army and basically walked across most of Europe to help liberate it. And he got shot in the hip and it jacked him up, shortened his life.
Mm-hmm.
He was never the same after that. But my other grandfather, my dad's father, he was in the Navy and he was in 5 invasions, and he was always telling war stories and stuff like the whole time we were growing up. So when I met Andy, it was just like
Yeah.
we liked each other from the get go because we had so much in common. We were both in real estate. He was hungry, he
Oh.
was young and upcoming, and we were focusing on our dreams and all the things we wanted to accomplish with our life. And it's cool to meet a kindred spirit, that's somebody that's kind of on the same path, because most people are just average. They tend to major in minor things. And so when you meet somebody that also is hungry and determined and confident in themselves and have the attitude that, hey, I'm going to figure this shit out one way or another.
Right.
I'm going to figure out to have the success
Mm-hmm.
that I want. It's rare. You just
Yeah.
don't meet that many people that kind of have that. And so
Mm-hmm.
those kinds of connections are really great as well. But it's like from the dating perspective, it's just doesn't matter what you do. It's like going out on a date like that with somebody that feels that way from the get go. You feel like, man, the universe, God has finally smiled on me today, and
Right.
this is meant to be. I can't wait to see what happens and where it goes. That's part of
Mm-hmm.
the fun of life. When I was in my when I was in my like late 20s and I was working at a place that I was, this is before I went into business with my business partners in real estate. And I had one of the guys I worked with, and he grew up in like downtown Orlando, College Park area. I don't know if you're familiar with College Park is, all around downtown. It's all brick streets, and most of the
Yeah.
houses were built in like the 20s, 30s, 40s.
Mm-hmm.
They have a lot of charm, siding, hip roofs, just really a cool place. And then, in the downtown area, which is like Princeton Street and like Edgewater Drive, there was this little tiny barber shop, and it had, he would have that little barber pole. The thing didn't spin.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like when he was working, he would hang it on the outside, and he had this sign that was like a piece of cardboard that was handwritten. It looked like it was fucking 30, 40 years old and faded. And when he wasn't working, it was like just said closed. And when he
Mm-hmm.
was, he'd flip it around and says, "We're open, come on in." And when you walk in, it's just a barber's chair, this ratchet looking sink,
Mm-hmm.
this old ass mirror, and the sign that just said all haircuts like $2 or something like that. So he was a
Wow.
barber. And
Yeah.
this dude was like in at the time I started going to him, he was like in his late 80s. And he wore these shirts that were like buttoned down, and he'd worn them so much they were kind of almost like see-through a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
And he had a mustache, and he was nice. He was always talk. You could just go sit down and get a haircut, and for 45 minutes he'd talk your ear off and tell you stories. And
Yeah.
he had this little, it was a handwritten sign
Mm-hmm.
that he had hanging on his wall. It was like, jammed into the back of the little mirror. I mean, it was just, imagine this little sink about this big.
Right.
And the floor was kind of, it wasn't even that clean. There was kind of dirty, but I mean, it was $2 for a haircut, and he did
Mm-hmm.
a great job. And obviously, I think we used to give him 15, $20 or whatever, because it was a normal haircut
Yeah.
for a barber would cost. This guy never raised his prices, and he'd been doing that. Like when he's in World War II, he
Mm-hmm.
was a barber in the Navy.
Oh.
And so after he got out,
Yeah.
that's what he did his whole life. And he had been working there in that location for decades.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy that had introduced me to him, he started going there when he was a little boy. And at this point, we're in like our late 30s,
Right.
I'm sorry, late 20s.
Mm-hmm.
And I continued to go for several years. And he had this sign that it just said something along the lines of like, because had plenty of money to retire.
Mm-hmm.
He's happily married, been with the same woman his whole life, raises kids, got grandkids, great grandkids. And it was like, people asked me, it's like, his name was Phil.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like Phil the barber. And, and I went there until he was probably in his 90s. And then I noticed one time I was driving by, the barber thing was gone. And then a few months later, I ended up seeing him in Publix. He was shopping there.
Oh.
And so he'd obviously retired at some point. But the sign just basically said, it's like, why do you keep doing this? Why do you keep showing up here and cutting people's hair after
Mm-hmm.
all these years, all these decades?
Yeah.
And he just said, at the bottom of it was like, I just can't wait to see what happens next. That's why I
Oh.
keep showing up.
Oh. That's so sweet. Is he alive?
I seriously doubt it. He was in his probably last time he went there, 99, 2000, and he was early 90s, like 91, 92 at that
Oh
point.
no.
So I seriously doubt whether he's still
Mm-hmm.
with us, unless he's 115, 118. But the dude was like, he was a machine, man.
Yeah.
I think there were like one or two ratty chairs in there.
Mm-hmm.
And, sometimes there were other dudes that would come in and sit and wait. And it was mostly older clientele
Yeah.
or dads coming in with their kids because, when they were kids, they used to go to them.
Right.
I mean, I used to go to the same barber when I was in high school that my dad went to.
Mm-hmm.
And there were pictures of him, back when he was cutting, hair in the early 60s when my dad was a kid. So
Yeah.
that was pretty trippy
Oh.
in the 1980s to, because he was obviously an older man by then.
Mm-hmm.
But he cut hair for a lot of years as well. He was a character. He'd talk your ear off.
Nice. We love the humble old men.
He was pretty awesome.
Yeah. But I agree with the whole. It's not really the date itself that makes the impression. It's just the feeling with the person, how they make you feel. Because not necessarily my date, but just I went into it shy. I've always been shy, quiet and nervous. I almost canceled because I just had like social anxiety that I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm going to talk about. And we went on a speedboat. So it's like adrenaline kind of rush. And me, I don't want to get my hair wet. I'm like, oh my gosh, my makeup's gonna get messed up, mascara, and all of that kind of just disappeared because he made it such a good time. Like he just made it fun, funny, exciting, and like he was screaming, and I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, I'm screaming now, and he's sliding left and right because the boat's moving like this, and your pants are wet, and I'm sliding. I'm just like, this is like such a great time. And then afterwards, I'm just like still on a high that I'm like, yeah, let's get food. Let's try this food. Let's try this place. Let's go here. And then we made plans for later that night. And I'm just like, that was such a great time because he got me out of my comfort zone. And that's so special to me. Like when people can make me talk and make me become outgoing because I'm not normally like that. So I would
You felt
say,
comfortable and safe.
yeah, I'm like,
Because
yeah,
it was dangerous. It's dangerous masculinity, driving a
right.
speedboat.
Yeah.
I used to do that a lot when I used to have my, I had an air nautique, ski nautique was a wakeboarding boat.
Mm.
And that boat, you could go full speed, 45 miles an hour, and then turn the wheel as fast as you could to the right or the left, and the boat would just,
Oh my
because it had
gosh.
fins in the front, and it
Yeah.
dug right into the water. And, I would take my different girlfriends I had over the years out, and it's like, they loved it.
Yeah.
That or taking a girl on a jet ski, that would, when they're holding on to you and
Yeah.
it really turns a woman on.
Yeah. It's fun. It's exciting.
Did he get to the promised land?
He became my boyfriend eventually.
Ah, so I'll take that as a yes.
Yeah.
He made it to the promised land. She
He,
enjoyed his dangerous masculinity.